I start every morning the same way, waking up at 4:30 as if my internal clock were still set to work, even though it's been 7 years since I left the federal prosecutor's office. Old habits die hard, especially when you've lived 73 years, and most of them have been spent in strict routines. Today was no exception. The gray dawn is barely breaking through the blinds of my bedroom in my house on Sage Street in Kemmerer. The city is still asleep, but not me. From the window, I can see the silhouettes of the low mountains surrounding our small Wyoming mining town. Edna once said they looked like sleeping giants. Now, 3 years after her death, I'm beginning to realize what she meant. Putting on my robe, I walk down to the kitchen. It's a spacious room with wooden furniture that Edna picked out herself. The coffee maker is still set for 2 cups, one for me, one for my wife, who is no longer here. I never changed the setting. A small thing, but it reminds me of how long we've been together. Almost 50 years. 50 years that flew by like a single day. In the living room on the mantelpiece is a picture from our wedding, the 26th of April, 1970. Edna in a simple white dress with a wide smile and a pink diamond ring on her finger. A ring that is now stored in a safe upstairs in my office. Not because of its value, though it's not insignificant, but because it's the one thing I can't see on a daily basis without the sharp pain of loss. The pink diamond was a rarity even back then. Its story began with my grandfather, who acquired it from a European collector in the 30s. The diamond passed through the hands of 3 generations of men in our family before I set it in a ring for Edna. She wore it every day of our lives together, and when cancer took her, it was the ring I removed from her lifeless hand before the casket was closed. I sip my hot coffee and listen to the silence of the house. It used to be noisy when our son Hayden was growing up, when friends came over, when Edna cooked in the kitchen to the sound of jazz. Now only the creaking floorboards remind me that the house is still alive, albeit empty. Hayden, my only son who could be here more often. 42 years old, lives half an hour away, but he visits me once a month, and reluctantly. Our relationship was strained long before Edna died. Maybe it's my fault. I never approved of his choice of a jewelry appraiser over law, nor of his wife. Tiana came into his life 8 years ago, a young, ambitious woman with a sharp tongue and cold eyes. She never hid her disappointment at marrying a man who chose to stay in provincial Kemmerer instead of moving to New York or Los Angeles. Nor did she hide the fact that she considered me a relic of the past, an old-fashioned, conservative old man clinging to outdated values. Edna always found common ground with her. My wife had a knack for seeing the best in people, a quality I never fully possessed, despite all my legal acumen. After Edna died, Tiana stopped even pretending to tolerate me. I go up to my office to begin work on my memoirs, a project I've been pushing back for years. On the wall hang my diplomas, photos of me with famous politicians, newspaper clippings of high-profile cases I've prosecuted. 30 years of service in the federal prosecutor's office have left their mark. In the corner of my office is a safe, a massive, old-fashioned safe with a digital code. I open it every week to make sure Edna's ring is safe. The code is simple, 260470, the date of our wedding. Sentimental, perhaps even unwise from a security standpoint, but after so many years in law enforcement, I've earned the right to some sentimentality. Inside, in addition to documents and a small amount of cash, is a velvet box. I open it. A pink diamond catches the morning light, refracting it into dozens of shades. Experts estimate it at $3 million, but to me it's priceless. The ringing of the phone interrupts a moment of reminiscence. Hayden's name pops up on the screen. "Good morning, son," I answer, closing the safe. "Hey, Dad, Tiana and I wanted to stop by your place for dinner tonight. Would that be okay?" Spontaneous visits like this aren't my son's style. He usually plans them in advance, like a meeting with an unpleasant client. "Sure, come on over. 6 o'clock?" "Yes, that'll be fine," he said with tension in his voice. "There's something Tiana wanted to discuss with you. I'm not asking what it is. Experience has taught me that it's better to be prepared for the unexpected." "I'll be waiting," I answer and hang up. The rest of the morning passes in routine, making breakfast, reading the local newspaper, watching the news. After lunch, my old friend and colleague Perry Abbott, with whom we worked together in the prosecutor's office, calls. "Wilford, old buddy, did you hear about the fundraiser at Lincoln Center next week?" his bass voice always full of energy despite his age. No, why? It's being organized by our Judge Greenwood. All the cream of the county society will be there. I thought maybe you'd like to join us. Get out of my voluntary confinement. Thank you, Perry, but you know I'm not a fan of such events. Your sister-in-law seems to have a different opinion. I saw her name on the guest list. This news surprises me. Tiana? Since when does she hang out with Judge Greenwood? I have no idea, but she's definitely on the VIP list. Even requested a seat closer to the main table. Trying to make an impression, I guess. After talking to Perry, I can't help but feel uneasy. Tiana has always aspired to the upper classes, but she usually stayed away from my former coworkers. Something about this situation makes me wary. Toward evening, while preparing dinner for Hayden and Tiana, I noticed that Tiana has recently taken an unusual interest in our family history. 2 weeks ago, during their last visit, she asked me at length about her and Edna's wedding, how we met, our anniversaries. At the time, I thought it was just an attempt at a relationship. She even mentioned that she was gathering material for a family photo album, a birthday present for Hayden. I want to document your family's history, she said with a warmth that was rare for her. All the important dates, events, traditions. I even showed her some old photos from the album, told her about my engagement to Edna, about proposing to her with the ring that was now in the safe. Tiana listened with an interest I had never noticed in her before. Now, chopping vegetables for a salad, I wondered if this sudden interest in family history was more than mere curiosity. And wasn't today's visit related to the fundraiser Perry had mentioned? By 6 o'clock, the table was set. I've put out Edna's finest china, a little revenge on Tiana, who was always leering at those old-fashioned plates. At 6 sharp, the doorbell rings. Hayden looks tired. Dark circles under his eyes, unevenly shaven chin. Tiana, on the other hand, is fresh and elegant in an austere blue dress. Her short hair is perfectly styled, and her makeup is flawless. She smiles slightly, but that smile does not affect her eyes. Hello, Wilford. She's the only one who addresses me by my first name, not father or papa. Come on in. Dinner is ready, I say as I let them into the house. Over dinner, the conversation is strained, mostly about the weather and local news. Finally, Tiana gets down to business. I got an invitation to a fundraiser at Lincoln Center, she says casually, as if it were a trip to the supermarket. There's going to be some very powerful people there. Yes, I've heard about that, I reply. Perry Abbott mentioned that you were on the guest list. A flicker of surprise flashes in her eyes. She didn't expect me to know. Yeah, I'm making useful connections, she explains. For Hayden's career, of course. His talent as an appraiser deserves more recognition. My son squirms uncomfortably in his chair. We both know his wife is pursuing her own ambitions, not his. Of course, you have to be of a certain caliber at these events, Tiana continues, taking a sip of wine. It's important to make the right first impression. And what does that require? I wondered, though I could already guess what she was getting at. Nothing much. The right outfit, accessories. She glances at my hands as if assessing whether there's anything valuable there. By the way, I was so inspired by our conversation about family history. All those photos, all those stories. It's so important to keep the memory of the past alive. Her words sound fake, but I nod, pretending to believe her sudden interest in family values. The evening ends earlier than usual, Tiana citing preparations for an important presentation at work. Already at the door, she turns to me with an unexpected question. Is it true that Edna's ring has been in your family for generations? It's such a romantic story. Yes, it passed from father to son until I gave it to Edna, I answered without going into detail. And now you have it? Her voice sounds almost casual, but her eyes are watching my reaction carefully. Yes, in a safe place, I answer evasively. After they leave, I sit in the living room for a long time, staring at the picture with Edna. There's something about Tiana's behavior that makes me suspicious, but I can't pinpoint what it is. Maybe it's just senile paranoia, the former prosecutor's habit of seeing a catch in everything. Before I go to bed, I check the safe of the velvet box with the ring is still there. The pink diamond sparkles in the dim light of the office, reminding me of days that will never return. The day of Hayden and Tiana's visit was surprisingly warm for October. I spent the morning preparing their favorite dishes. Rosemary roasted chicken and blueberry pie from Edna's recipe. Family dinners had once been a tradition. Now they were a rarity. Perhaps that's why I tried so hard. Shortly before they arrived, I decided to change the tablecloth to one that Edna had saved for special occasions. Dark blue with silver embroidered patterns. As I arranged the silverware, I caught myself thinking that I was doing it more for Edna than for our guests. She had always been the soul of this house, the heart of it, and I tried to keep up the traditions she valued so much. The doorbell rang at 6 o'clock sharp. Hayden had inherited my punctuality, though he rejected many of my other traits. "Hi, Daddy," he said, walking into the house and awkwardly hugging me. He was followed by Tiana, dressed in a strict black dress that looked inappropriately expensive for a casual family dinner. "Wilford," she nodded at me, holding out a bottle of wine instead of greeting me. "Chardonnay, 2018. I remembered Edna liked white wine. There was a learned warmth in her voice, and I felt again the slight irritation she had always aroused in me. Tiana had never loved Edna, rather tolerated her presence. Her current attempts to feign intimacy with my late wife seemed fake. "Thank you," I replied, accepting the bottle. "Come on in. It's almost ready." The living room, like the rest of my house, was unchanged from Edna's time. The same sofas with faded upholstery, the same pictures on the walls, the same books on the shelves. Tiana had once called the place a museum of the last century, and she didn't hide her disdain. "How's your work coming along, Hayden?" I asked, pouring wine into glasses. "Not bad," he shrugged. "They opened a new branch in Evanston. I've been asked to head up the appraisal department there." "That's great news," I said, genuinely excited. "A promotion?" "In a way," Tiana said before Hayden could answer. "Although it might have been better if he'd accepted the offer from New York last year." Hayden threw her a disgruntled look, but remained silent. Old topic, old argument. "Evanston's a nice town," I said, trying to lighten the mood. "It's only a couple hours from here. You'll come back more often." "I hope so," my son said without much enthusiasm. At dinner, the conversation turned to the upcoming fundraiser Perry had mentioned. "I got an invitation from Judge Greenwood," Tiana said, carefully cutting off a piece of chicken. "It's a terrific networking opportunity." "I didn't realize you knew Judge Greenwood," I remarked. "Oh, we met at a contemporary art conference 2 months ago." She smiled slightly. "His wife is interested in jewelry, and when I mentioned that Hayden is a jewelry appraiser, a conversation ensued. "And now you're going to an evening where half the town will be there?" "I'm not just going," she sounded proud. "I'm on the VIP list, seats next to the main table. The judge thinks I could be useful in organizing charity auctions. I have a good eye for art. It's a really good opportunity for us," Hayden added with an enthusiasm that seemed slightly fake. "Tiana is a terrific networker." "Of course," she said, "though it's important to look the part at these events. Half of success is making the right impression." Her gaze slid across the living room, lingering on the framed photograph of Edna on the mantelpiece. "You know, Wilford, I've always admired Edna's style," she said abruptly. "She has such an exquisite ring in her wedding picture. It's a real pink diamond, isn't it?" I nodded, surprised by this sudden turn in the conversation. "Yes, it is. A rare piece." "They're worth a fortune now," Tiana continued casually. "I saw one at an auction in Chicago that went for several million." "It's a family heirloom," I said dryly. "It's not worth the money." "Of course," she agreed quickly, but there was a calculating glint in her eyes. "I mean historical and sentimental value. They don't make things like that anymore." The conversation turned to other topics, but I noticed Tiana occasionally returned to the discussion of family traditions and heirlooms. She even asked me to tell her how the ring came into our family. "It's a really fascinating story," she said with unexpected enthusiasm. "For the family album I'm making, I want to include not only photos, but also stories about important family values." Although I was alerted to her interest, I couldn't find a reason to say no. Besides, telling the story of the ring had always given me pleasure. "My grandfather, Theodore Bailey, was a diplomat in Europe in the 30s, I began. During one of his diplomatic missions to Vienna, he met Count Esterhazy, a gem collector. The Count was going bankrupt and was selling off his collection piecemeal. Among the stones was this pink diamond, small, a little more than a carat, but of exceptional clarity and rare color." Tiana listened with unexpected attention, without interrupting. My grandfather brought it to America and kept it as an investment. Then he gave it to my father, and he gave it to me. I decided to make it into a ring for Edna. It was a tradition to pass the stone on to the next generation for a future wife. Do you know its exact value now? Tiana asked. A few years ago, I insured it for $3 million, I answered, but prices have gone up since then. She whistled and Hayden looked surprised, apparently unaware of the stone's real value. And you keep it at home? I could hear the disbelief in her voice. In a safe place, I answered evasively, not wanting to discuss the details. It should be in a safe deposit box, Hayden said. It's too valuable to keep at home? Maybe, I agreed. But I like to look at it sometimes. It reminds me of Edna. After dinner, we moved to the living room for coffee and dessert. Tiana kept asking me about family traditions, how Edna and I celebrated holidays, what rituals we had. I told her, feeling a strange mixture of pleasure at the memories and wariness at her unusual interest. When was your wedding? She asked, taking a sip of coffee. April 26th, 1970, I answered. It was early spring, and the apple trees were blooming. How romantic, she said. More than half a century ago. It's amazing how you've maintained such a strong relationship throughout your life. Love and respect, I replied simply, and shared values. As they were about to leave, Tiana suddenly hugged me, a gesture she'd never done before. Thank you for this evening, Wilford, she said with a smile, and for all these stories. They're invaluable to our family archive. After they left, I sat in my chair for a long time, pondering Tiana's strange behavior. Her sudden interest in family history, especially the ring, seemed suspicious. But perhaps I'm being unfair to her. Maybe she's really trying to mend relationships, to create something meaningful for Hayden. Before I went to bed, I went up to my office and opened the safe to make sure the ring was still there. The small box lay where I'd left it. Inside, a pink diamond shimmered in the dim light of the desk lamp. I closed the box in the safe, dialing the code 260470, the date of Edna and I's wedding, a simple code, sentimental. Probably not the safest, but I never thought it would occur to anyone close to me to steal the ring. The next day started as usual. Early rise, coffee, reading the morning paper. By 10 o'clock, I was already working on my memoirs, jotting down memories of my first years in the prosecutor's office. Then I went to the supermarket, stopped at the drugstore to get some medicine, and had lunch at the little cafe on the corner of Pine Street. When I got home, I found a message from Perry on my answering machine. Wilford, just calling to see if you've changed your mind about the fundraiser. There's going to be a lot of interesting people there, and I thought you could use some fun. Call me back. I didn't bother to call back. Such events had long since ceased to interest me. After Edna's death, I preferred quiet evenings at home, with a book, a glass of whiskey, and memories. The rest of the day passed in the usual routine, working on my memoirs, a phone conversation with a former colleague from Cheyenne, and dinner alone with the jazz that Edna loved so much. In the evening, I turned on the TV and watched an old Humphrey Bogart movie that Edna and I had once loved. At 10 o'clock, I turned off the TV and went upstairs to the bedroom, on the way stopping by the study to turn off the computer. The safe stood in the corner, massive and solid, holding the memory of the best years of my life. I glanced at it briefly and went to bed, drifting off to sleep to the quiet sound of the wind outside the window. The morning began as usual. I got up at 4:30, brewed some coffee, and settled down with my laptop in the living room. I'd gotten into the habit of checking social media news recently. Perry had insisted that I needed to keep up with the times, so I'd set up accounts on several networks, though I rarely use them, mostly to read articles and keep up with local community news. I was scrolling through my feed that morning when a post by Lita Foster, a close friend of Tiana's, caught my eye. The photo showed the two of them standing together in a lavish room at Lincoln Center. Tiana was in an elegant dark green dress with artfully styled hair and bright makeup. But that wasn't what made me freeze. A pink diamond ring was clearly visible on her hand. Edna's ring. I zoomed in, my heart pounding faster. There was no doubt about it. The recognizable cut, the distinctive pink hue, the unique Art Deco platinum setting I'd specially ordered for Edna. It was definitely her ring. Below the photo was a correspondence between Lita and Tiana. Lita. Amazing ring. Where did you find one like that? Tiana. I borrowed my late mother-in-law's ring for the party. No one will notice. Lita. Wow, it looks crazy expensive. Tiana. It is. A real pink diamond, can you believe it? Worth a fortune. My father-in-law keeps it as the apple of his eye, but tonight I'm the queen of the evening. I reread this correspondence several times, not believing my eyes. The blood rushed to my face and my hands trembled. Borrowed, without permission. Edna's ring, which I kept as the most precious reminder of our love. Putting my laptop aside, I rushed upstairs to my office. The safe looked untouched. With shaky hands, I dialed the code 260470. The door opened with a distinctive click. Inside was everything as usual. Folders with documents, cash, my father's antique watch. Only the velvet box with the ring was missing. I went through the contents of the safe again, hoping I just missed it. No luck. The ring was gone. And then it hit me. Tiana, with her sudden interest in our family history, asking about the ring, her special attention when I mentioned the date of the wedding, April 26th, 1970, the same code as on the safe. She was deliberately ferreting out information to steal the ring. Thoughts whirled through her head. How long had she been planning this? How deep did her lies go? And what to do now? In the old days as a federal prosecutor, I dealt with criminals of varying caliber on a daily basis. But I never thought I'd face betrayal in my own family. Tiana hadn't just taken the ring, she'd violated the sanctity of Edna's memory, invaded our home, abused my trust. I went back to my laptop and looked at the photo one more time. Judging by the time of publication, the party was going on right now. Tiana was there, with Edna's ring on her finger, calling it borrowed, even though she'd actually stolen it. It was more than I could handle. With an abrupt motion, I grabbed the phone and dialed the number of Leonard Miles, my longtime friend and attorney, who had handled all my legal matters since I retired. "Leonard," I said as soon as he answered, wasting no time in greeting him. "I need your help. Now." "Wilford? What's wrong?" I could hear the concern in his voice. "Theft, from my house. My sister-in-law stole Edna's pink diamond ring." "Are you sure?" he asked cautiously. "I'm positive. The safe is empty, and she's bragging about the ring right now at a fundraiser at Lincoln Center. I have pictures of her admitting she borrowed it without asking." There was a brief pause, then Leonard spoke in a businesslike tone. "All right, Wilford, what do you want to do? We could go directly to Hayden and have him." I interrupted him. "No," I interrupted him. "I want to report the theft officially, to the police. Have them report the theft of a $3 million pink diamond ring." "Wilford, think about it." Leonard's voice became more cautious. "This is your family. Maybe there's a way to resolve this peacefully." "Family?" I felt anger rising in me. Tiana was never my family. She manipulated Hayden for years. She despised Edna. She always looked down on me, and now she's stolen the most precious thing to me, pretending she was just borrowing it. "No, Leonard. I want the police to catch her red-handed, in front of all these people she's so eager to impress. I want her to realize the cost of what she's done." Leonard sighed. "Do you realize that this will affect Hayden too? He'll be humiliated. Hayden made a choice when he married that woman." My voice shook, but I continued. "And he continues to make that choice every day. It's time for him to see who he chose." "Okay, Wilford, I'm going to call Police Chief Brown. He owes me. Give me the address where the party's being held." I dictated the Lincoln Center address to him and described what the ring looked like. Leonard promised to call me back when everything was settled. The wait was agonizing. I sat in my chair, gripping the armrest so hard my knuckles turned white. Past and present were intertwined in my mind. I remembered putting that ring on Edna's finger on our wedding day, how she'd admired it, turning her hand so the pink diamond caught the light, and how now that woman, that, thief, called it borrowed, as if she had the right to dispose of my wife's memory. The phone rang 40 minutes later. "It's ready," Leonard said. "Brown sent 4 officers. They should arrive at Lincoln Center in about 15 minutes. "Thank you." My voice sounded hoarse. "I want to know what's going to happen." "I asked Brown to keep me informed," he assured me. But are you sure you want to go all the way? There's still time to withdraw the application. No, I said firmly. Let things take their course. The next half hour dragged on endlessly. I tried to imagine what was happening at Lincoln Center. I saw the police officers entering the auditorium, the heads of the guests turning, Tiana turning pale as they headed straight for her. Finally, the phone rang again. It was Leonard. Wilford, he began, the police have just left Lincoln Center. They detained Tiana on the spot in front of all the guests. The ring has been seized as evidence. How did she react? I asked, feeling strangely devastated. According to Brown, she was in shock. At first, she denied the theft, claiming she had just borrowed the ring and was going to return it. When she was read her rights, she started screaming that you were doing this out of revenge, that you never took it. Many guests were recording what was happening on their phones. I covered my eyes, visualizing the scene. And Hayden, was he there? Yes, Leonard's voice softened. He was furious. First at the police, then when he realized you'd filed the report, at you. He yelled that you'd gone too far, that he'd never forgive you. I felt a stab of pain, but I suppressed it. What's done is done. What now? I asked. Tiana was taken to the station for questioning. The ring will remain in police custody as evidence until the investigation is complete. But Wilford, you should know this isn't going to end quietly. There's going to be publicity. You're a former federal prosecutor. Tiana's a member of high society, a charity party with powerful guests. The story will get in the papers. Let it, I replied, feeling the fatigue wash over me. I'm not going to hide. She stole something that belonged to Edna, something that should have been left untouched. Hanging up the phone, I sit in silence for a long time. Somewhere at the police station, Tiana was now giving a statement, probably continuing to insist that she had simply borrowed the ring. Hayden was probably looking for a lawyer or calling his powerful friends. And here I was, in an empty house, with an empty safe, and the feeling that I had just destroyed the last remnants of my family. But I didn't regret what I'd done. Some things are too sacred to let people desecrate them with impunity. Edna's ring was just such a thing, and if the price of keeping it safe is breaking up with my son and daughter-in-law, well, that's the price. The morning after the incident at Lincoln Center was overcast. The gray sky was pressing in, as if foreshadowing the storm that was about to erupt in my life. I stayed up all night reliving yesterday's events over and over again. Around 9:01 a.m., the phone rang. Leonard reported that Tiana had been released on the bail Hayden had posted. The theft charges had not yet been dropped, and the ring was being held by the police until the circumstances were clarified. You should be prepared, Leonard warned. Hayden was furious. I wouldn't be surprised if he was at your door soon. I knew he was right. I knew there would be a confrontation. Still, when Hayden's black SUV pulled up at the gate at 11:30, my heart twitched. From the window, I watched him get out of the car, my only son, still dressed in the tuxedo from the fundraiser, wrinkled from a sleepless night. There was tension in his movements as he slammed the door shut abruptly and walked with wide strides toward the house. The bell rang demandingly, aggressively. I opened the door, and Hayden burst inside without waiting for an invitation. How could you? He hissed, stopping in the hallway and glaring at me. How the hell could you do that? I closed the door and turned to him calmly. Come on in. I think we have something to discuss. Discuss? His voice went up an octave. You embarrassed my wife in front of the whole town. She's been arrested as a criminal, taken to the police station. Her picture's all over the local news. And you want to discuss this? Your wife stole Edna's ring. I kept my voice steady, even though I was seething inside. Stole a $3 million family heirloom. What else was I supposed to do? Hayden strode into the living room and turned sharply toward me. She didn't steal it. She just borrowed it. She was going to return it the next day. Without permission, Hayden. Without my knowledge. Breaking into the safe. What do you call that? She didn't break into the safe, he exclaimed. You told her the code yourself. She said you showed her how to open the safe when you were bragging about the ring. I shook my head, amazed at the audacity of this lie. I never showed her the code to the safe. She had purposely elicited the wedding date from me, something I use as a code. She manipulated me to gain access to the ring. That's ridiculous. Hayden took off his jacket and threw it on the couch. She just wanted to impress me at the charity event. This was her chance to make some useful acquaintances that could help us both. She wasn't going to steal the ring forever. And that justifies invading my home? Violating my privacy? She could have asked Hayden, but she chose to go behind my back. She knew you'd say no, he shouted. You never approved of her, never gave her a chance. From the beginning, you looked down on her as if she wasn't good enough for your precious son. Those words hit something inside me. Perhaps there was some truth in them. I'd never really considered Tiana a good match for Hayden, but not because of snobbery, he thought. I didn't disapprove of her because she wasn't good enough, I said slowly. It was because I saw right through her, her ambition, her willingness to step over others to achieve her goals. She never loved you the way you deserve to be loved, Hayden. His face contorted with anger. Don't you dare talk about my wife like that. You know nothing about our relationship. You've always been too busy with your career to really get to know your own family. It was an old, stale rebuke. I did work hard when Hayden was little. Probably too much. But that never meant I didn't love him. I worked to give you a better life, I said, so you could get an education, have everything you needed. And what about you? Wasn't that necessary? His voice shook. You missed my graduation because you had an important case. You didn't show up when I got my first award as an evaluator because you were at a conference. Even when I got married, you couldn't hide your disappointment. I've always been proud of you, Hayden, I replied quietly. And if I ever expressed disappointment, it wasn't in you, but in your decisions. My decisions or the fact that I wasn't a copy of you? He grinned bitterly. You always wanted me to follow in your footsteps, become a lawyer, carry on your legacy. And when I chose my own path, you never really supported me. There was a grain of truth in what he said. I really hoped he would continue the family tradition in law. But did that mean I loved him any less? I was trying to guide you, I said. Maybe not always in the right way, but I never stopped caring about you. Hayden shook his head, as if my words didn't matter. And that's why you put on this show? Out of caring? Do you know what you did to Tiana's reputation? My reputation? People who could have been our clients saw my wife being taken away by the police. Your wife should have thought of that before stealing a family heirloom, I replied firmly. Edna's ring isn't just a piece of jewelry. It's a memory of 50 years of our marriage, of the woman who was the center of my life. Mom would want it to stay in the family, Hayden exclaimed. She would want Tiana to wear it. That statement shook me to the core. Don't you dare speak for Edna. My voice turned icy. Your mother would never have approved of what Tiana did, and the way you're defending her now. Hayden walked over to the fireplace, where a picture of Edna on our wedding day stood. On her finger shone the same ring that was now lying in the police station as evidence. You know, he began quietly, Tiana told me that Mom promised her that ring. I stared at him, stunned by this brazen lie. What? Shortly before she died, Hayden continued, not looking me in the eye. Mom told Tiana that she wanted the ring to stay in the family, to be worn by her son's wife. She asked me not to tell you right away, to give you time to get over the loss. But now that it's been 3 years, I couldn't believe my ears. Edna would never say such a thing, and certainly not behind my back. It was a blatant lie made up by Tiana to justify her theft. And worst of all, Hayden seemed to believe it. It's not true, I said firmly. Edna never said anything like that. Tiana is lying and you know it. What makes you think you know everything Mom said? Hayden turned to me, and there was a challenge in his eyes. They spent time together when you were at work. They had their own conversations. Not in the last months of Edna's life, I objected. I resigned the year before she died, so I could be with her all the time. And Tiana only visited her a few times, always briefly and always with you. You just don't want to admit that Mom could have made the decision without your knowledge. In that moment, I realized how deeply Tiana had manipulated my son. She hadn't just stolen the ring, she'd constructed an entire story to justify her actions, and she'd made Hayden believe it. Hayden, my voice softened. Think about it logically. If Edna really wanted the ring to go to Tiana, why wouldn't she tell me? Why not leave a letter or mention it in her will? Why create such secrecy around something that would have been her legitimate wish? For a moment there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes, but it quickly disappeared. Maybe she knew you would oppose it, he said stubbornly. Maybe she realized you'd never really accepted Tiana. Son, I stepped toward him, wanting to put a hand on his shoulder, but he pulled back. Edna had never been afraid to tell me the truth, no matter how unpleasant it was. In 50 years of marriage, we've had no secrets from each other. Think about it. Would your mother really have done that? Hayden turned away, and I could see I'd hit the mark. Somewhere deep inside, he knew I was right. Even if she was, he finally said, you didn't have to do that. You could have just called me, told me you knew about the ring. We could have handled it as a family. After Tiana had already lied to you? After she got the code to the safe and stole the ring? Do you think she'd admit to that? Hayden didn't answer, and that silence was louder than any words. He knew the truth, but he couldn't admit it. You know what? He finally said, stepping back to the couch and picking up his jacket. It doesn't matter. What you did is unforgivable. You humiliated my wife in front of the whole town. You ruined our reputation, and you're going to pay for it. What do you mean? I asked, feeling a chill run down my spine. Tiana had already contacted a lawyer. We're filing a counterclaim, claiming that the ring was promised to her by Edna. We're also suing for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We'll let the court decide who's right. I looked at my son, not recognizing him. How had we gotten to this point? How did we become enemies instead of family? Hayden, think about what you're doing, my voice was quiet. This woman is forcing you to go against your own father because of a piece of jewelry. It's not just a piece of jewelry, he exclaimed. It's a family heirloom, a memory of Mom. And it should stay in the family, with me and my wife, not lying in your safe like a museum piece. The ring will stay in the family, I agreed. Someday it will pass to you, but not to a woman who steals it and lies about it. Did you say everything? Hayden asked coldly, putting on his jacket. Because we're going to be communicating through lawyers from here on out. He headed for the door, and I followed, feeling the pain as if it were physical. Don't do this, son, I pleaded. Don't let it ruin what little we have left between us. Hayden stopped at the door and turned around. Something flashed in his eyes for a moment. Regret? Doubt? But then his face went back to a mask of cold determination. You ruined everything when you called the police instead of talking to me, he said. You're going to have to live with that decision and the consequences. With that, he walked out, slamming the door behind him. I watched through the window as he got into his car and sped off, leaving a cloud of dust behind him. I stood in the empty house feeling more alone than ever. Not just because of Hayden's departure, but because I realized how deeply Tiana had driven a wedge between us. She hadn't just stolen the ring, she'd stolen my son, making him believe lies about his own mother. And now I had to fight not just for Edna's ring, but for the truth about our family, for the memory of the woman we both loved, but remembered differently as it turned out. The day after Hayden's visit, I went to Leonard Miles' office downtown. The red brick building, built back in the 30s, retained the spirit of the old Kemmerer with its high ceilings and creaky wooden floors. Leonard had been practicing here for 40 years, and his office had remained unchanged all that time. A massive oak desk, walls hung with diplomas and photographs of famous politicians, and the smell of old books. The secretary, Martha, who had worked with him almost as long as I had known him, ushered me into the office without announcement. Wilford, Leonard rose from his desk, greeting me with a firm handshake. I've been expecting you. How are you holding up? I've been better, I admitted, sinking into the leather chair across from his desk. Hayden came by yesterday. He said he and Tiana were countersuing. Leonard sighed and adjusted his thin-rimmed glasses. Yes, I've already been informed. Their lawyer, Charles Pierce, contacted me last night. Quite an aggressive young man. They want the theft charges dropped, the ring returned, and compensation for emotional distress. On what grounds? And I asked, even though I already knew the answer. On the grounds that Tiana allegedly did not steal the ring, but only took it temporarily with the intention of returning it, and that she had the right to do so because, she said, Edna had promised her the ring before she died. I shook my head, reliving the anger and frustration again. That's a lie. Edna would never do such a thing behind my back. We'd been married for almost 50 years. We had no secrets from each other. I believe you, Wilford. Leonard looked me straight in the eye. But the question is, what can we prove in court? Do you have any documentation, evidence of Edna's will regarding the ring, I wondered? Technically, the ring wasn't mentioned as a separate line in Edna's will. All of her personal belongings passed to me as sole heir. There is no specific document about the ring, but the will clearly states that all of her personal belongings and jewelry passed to me. That's good, Leonard nodded, making notes. What about the value of the ring? You mentioned $3 million. That's the appraisal I got for insurance 6 years ago, I replied. But since then, the price of rare pink diamonds had risen substantially. Leonard picked up the phone and asked Martha to fetch a certain folder. A minute later, she came in with a thin leather folder and placed it in front of him. I took the liberty of doing a little research, Leonard said as he opened the folder. Since the ring is now in police custody as physical evidence, they asked an expert to evaluate it for the record. And the results are quite interesting. He pulled out a piece of paper with an official letterhead and handed it to me. According to Raymond Brooks, the state's top gemologist, the pink diamond in Edna's ring isn't just rare, it's historic. Supposedly, it's one of the stones from the Esterhazy collection you mentioned. But Brooks believes that before the Count, the diamond belonged to the Austrian aristocratic family of Lichnowsky, Beethoven's patrons. I stared at the document, amazed. The report indicated an appraised value of $7 million and noted the stone's historical value as a cultural artifact. $7 million? I reread the figure, not believing my eyes. That's a conservative estimate, Leonard nodded. At auction, a stone with that kind of history might go for 10 or 12 million. Brooks mentioned that several museums had already expressed interest when they heard about it. He'd even gotten an informal inquiry from a curator at the Smithsonian Institution. I set the document down on the table, trying to comprehend the information. Grandfather had never mentioned such a detailed history of the stone. Perhaps he didn't know about it, or maybe he kept it secret for fear of claims from European heirs. That changes the matter, I said slowly. Dramatically, Leonard agreed. It was no longer just a family heirloom, but an object of historical significance. If Tiana knew or guessed at the ring's true value, she might have, I said thoughtfully. Hayden works as a jewelry appraiser. He might have mentioned to her that the ring was worth more than the $3 million I'd insured it for. Leonard leaned back in his chair, interlocking his fingertips. That gives us an additional argument. The greater the value of the ring, the more serious the crime. And the less convincing the story that Edna had supposedly given away a $7 million historical artifact for nothing. He was right, but the thought of the case becoming even more high-profile made me uncomfortable. Not because of fear of publicity. In my years as a federal prosecutor, I was used to being the center of media attention, but because it deepened the rift between me and my son. What do you suggest? When I asked. First, let's keep this research secret for now. Leonard gathered the documents back into the folder. Let it be our bargaining chip in case it goes to trial. Second, I suggest we hire a private investigator to look into Hayden and Tiana's financial situation. If she was really planning to sell the ring or use it in any other way, there could be traces. No, I shook my head firmly. I'm not spying on my own son. It's enough that he and I are on opposite sides in this case. Leonard didn't insist, though I could tell by the look on his face that he didn't agree with my decision. Good. Then let's focus on disproving Tiana's claim that Edna allegedly promised her the ring. Is there anyone else who might have heard this conversation? Nurses, caregivers in the last days of Edna's life? I reflected, thinking back to the last weeks of my wife's life. She was dying at home, in our bedroom, surrounded by the care of the hospice service. Nurse Ruth came every day, and in the last week, caregiver Betty stayed with us. Ruth and Betty, I answered. They spent a lot of time with Edna. If this conversation had taken place, they might have known. Great, Leonard wrote down the names. I'll contact them for a statement. Did anyone else visit Edna during that time? My sister Olivia flew in from Atlanta for a few days, and of course Hayden and Tiana. But they didn't come very often. Tiana always found excuses to cut their visits short. Leonard continued to take notes. One more thing. We need to find out how often Tiana was alone with Edna. If she claims that the conversation was private, between the two of them, we need to prove that she didn't have those opportunities. Almost never, I said confidently. I'd hardly ever left Edna's side in the last few months. The only exception was my trip to the pharmacy for new painkillers the day before she died. I was gone for about an hour, but Ruth was with her the whole time. That's an important detail, Leonard nodded. Let's get in touch with Ruth as soon as possible. We discussed further strategy for another hour or so. Leonard warned that if the case went to trial, it could drag on for months and the ring would remain with the police during that time. Walking out of Leonard's office, I felt drained. Instead of doing enjoyable things in retirement, writing my memoir, traveling, socializing with friends, I found myself embroiled in an ugly legal battle with my own family. Standing on the sidewalk, I suddenly felt an acute longing for Edna. She had always been the moral compass of our family, the glue that held us together. Without her, everything fell apart like a house of cards. Hayden drifted further away, Tiana showed her true colors, and I was left alone, clinging to memories and the things that symbolized them. Wilford? Wilford Bailey, is that you? I turned around at the familiar voice. Standing in front of the bank across the street was Perry Abbott, my longtime friend and fellow prosecutor, with whom we'd worked side by side for nearly 30 years. He crossed the street and came toward me, smiling broadly. I thought it was you. What brings you downtown at this hour? He shook my hand, but the smile was quickly replaced by a concerned expression when he saw my face. What's wrong? You don't look your best. Long story, Perry, I sighed. Family problems. Heard some things about it. He lowered his voice. The whole town's talking about what happened at Lincoln Center. The ring theft, the police, the scandal. I grimaced. Of course, news travels fast in a small town like Kemmerer. Not the most pleasant moment of my life. Listen, Perry put his hand on my shoulder. I was just about to have lunch. You want to join me? Frank's has a great clam chowder tonight. I wanted to say no, but then I realized I wasn't ready to go back to an empty house and continue to wallow in my own thoughts. Thank you. My pleasure. Frank's was the oldest restaurant in town, with a simple but cozy interior and the best food for 100 miles around. Perry and I took a table in the corner, away from prying ears. So, he began as the waitress took our order and left. What's going on? I'd only heard scraps of stories, most of which I'm sure were exaggerated. I briefly told him the whole situation, how Tiana had figured out the code to the safe, stolen Edna's ring, how I'd discovered it from a picture on social media, the police intervention, and subsequent conflict with Hayden. Perry listened intently, not interrupting, only occasionally nodding or frowning. And now they're countersuing, claiming that Edna promised the ring to Tiana before she died. I finished my story. That's absurd, Perry said firmly. Edna would never do such a thing. I've known her almost as long as I've known you. She wouldn't do something like that behind your back. His confidence was a balm to my tortured soul. It was good to hear it from someone who really knew Edna, not just taking my side out of friendly sentiment. Thank you, Perry, but I'm afraid your testimony about Edna's character won't be enough in court. Maybe, he sipped his coffee, but I'm willing to testify if I have to. And I'm not the only one. A lot of people in this town knew you and Edna as a model couple who split everything in half. Tiana would have a hard time convincing anyone that Edna went behind your back on such an important matter. He fell silent as the waitress brought our order, the clam chowder for him and the steak for me. When she left, Perry leaned closer. Look, Wilford, I know you're feeling alone in this battle right now, but you're not. You have friends, people who know who you really are, and they don't believe a word of this Tiana fiction. He pulled a business card from the inside pocket of his jacket and held it out to me. This is Ella Ramirez, best family law specialist in the Tri-County area. I know you have Leonard, and he's a good lawyer, but Ella, she has a special talent for these cases. She sees angles that others miss. If you want a second opinion, call her. I've already talked to her, and she's willing to see you anytime. I took the card, touched by his concern. Thanks, Perry. I'll think about it. And also, he set the bowl of soup aside, I want you to know that whatever happens next, the ring is just a thing, an expensive thing, with a history, symbolic, but a thing nonetheless. Don't let this situation ruin everything you have left. The memory of Edna doesn't live in the ring, it lives in you. His words hit something deep inside me. Maybe I really was too focused on the ring as a symbol. Maybe the true memory of Edna was in our history, in our memories, in the way we loved each other over the years. You're right, I said quietly. Edna wouldn't want the ring to break up the family. But this isn't so much about the ring as it is about the betrayal, the lies. I understand, Perry nodded, and your reaction is perfectly natural. Just don't forget the bigger picture. Hayden is your only son. He may be under Tiana's influence now, but in time he may see the truth. The rest of the lunch passed in lighter conversation. We reminisced about old cases, mutual acquaintances, and funny incidents from our practice. As we said goodbye at the door of the restaurant, Perry shook my hand once more. Hang in there, old boy, and remember you're not alone. If you need anything else, just let me know. I watched him walk away and felt strangely relieved. My family may have fallen apart after Edna's death, but there were still people in my life who cared about me. People who knew the truth and were willing to support me in my hour of need. With that thought, I headed home, Ella Ramirez's business card in my pocket as a small hope that justice would prevail. The day of the trial was cold and overcast. The sky over Kemmerer was overhanging heavy gray clouds, promising rain or early snow. I stood in front of the mirror in the hallway, adjusting my tie, the dark blue one Edna had given me for the last birthday we'd celebrated together. It seemed symbolic to me to wear it today, when the fate of her ring was being decided. A lot had changed in the 3 months since the theft. Tiana's temporary theft charge had been suspended pending the resolution of the civil case over ownership of the ring. Hayden and I hadn't spoken in all that time, though I tried to call him several times. Tiana filed a formal lawsuit claiming that Edna had promised her the ring and that I was intentionally disinheriting her. Leonard and Ella Ramirez, hired on Perry's advice, prepared a solid defense. They gathered testimony from everyone who had been near Edna during the last months of her life, and no one corroborated Tiana's version of such a promise. Moreover, Nurse Ruth testified in writing that in the 1 hour that Tiana was supposedly able to be alone with Edna, she actually spent only 15 minutes in her room, with most of that time talking on the phone, barely paying attention to the dying woman. "Ready?" Leonard asked as I walked out of the house and got into his car parked in my driveway. "As ready as I can be," I replied as I buckled my seatbelt. "Remember what we discussed," he said as he pulled into the driveway. "No emotional outbursts, no direct accusations, just the facts, just the truth." Judge Havel is known for his unwavering adherence to the letter of the law. "I remember Samuel Havel," I nodded. "We crossed paths on a few cases when I was still working. A fair man. And very respectful of you," Leonard added. "That doesn't mean he'll side with you just out of old memory, though. We need hard evidence. We have Edna's will, which clearly states that all of her personal belongings passed to me," I reminded him. "We have the nurse's testimony that Tiana was never alone with Edna long enough to have this conversation. And there was direct evidence that she'd planned the theft by asking me for information about the safe." "Yes," Leonard agreed. "But don't forget, Charles Pierce is a very aggressive lawyer. He'll push on emotions, on Edna's intentions, on the fact that the ring should stay in the family. He'll try to paint you as a callous old man who holds on to material possessions instead of maintaining a relationship with his only son." We drove into the center of town, and I saw the county courthouse, a stately sandstone structure that retained the architectural style of the early 20th century. Journalists were already gathered at the entrance, local and even a few from Cheyenne. The story about the theft of a multi-million-dollar pink diamond ring, a family conflict, and the jewelry's historical value had spread across the state. "Don't pay attention to the press," Leonard advised, parking in the service parking lot behind the building. "No commentary before or after the meeting. Let the facts speak." We entered through a side entrance, avoiding the crowd of reporters. Ella Ramirez was already waiting for us in the hallway, a stylish Latina in her 40s and 50s, with a sharp eye and a determined expression. "Good morning, Mr. Bailey." She extended her hand to me. "Everything's ready for the meeting. I've just gone through the latest documents. They don't present anything new. The same unsubstantiated assertions." "What do you think of our chances?" I asked, shaking her hand. "Very high," she said confidently. "But don't relax. There is always an element of unpredictability in such emotionally charged cases." We entered the courtroom, a large room with high ceilings and wooden benches, polished to a shine by years of use. I noticed Hayden and Tiana sitting at the plaintiff's table with their lawyer, Charles Pierce, a young man with a predatory expression in a suit too expensive for a provincial lawyer. Hayden looked tense, avoiding my gaze. Tiana, on the other hand, was looking directly at me with a defiant expression. She was wearing a strict dark blue dress that was supposed to give the image of a serious, respectable woman, but I could see through that facade. "Stand up. Court is now in session. Judge Samuel Howell presiding," the clerk announced, and all present rose. Judge Howell entered the room, a gray-haired man with a shrewd eye and a stern expression. He nodded a greeting and took his seat. "Sit down," he said, and the rustle of clothes filled the room. Case number 834, Tiana Bailey v. Wilford Bailey, a dispute over ownership of pink diamond jewelry. Counsel for the parties, introduce yourselves. Charles Pierce is the first to rise. Charles Pierce, representing the plaintiff, Tiana Bailey, Your Honor. Ella Ramirez and Leonard Miles, representing the defendant, Wilford Bailey. Ella rose and Leonard nodded beside her. Judge Howell looked at both parties over his glasses. "Good. I've read the case file. Mr. Pierce, you allege that the late Edna Bailey promised the disputed ring to your client? That's a serious allegation, especially since it contradicts Mrs. Bailey's written will. Are you prepared to produce the evidence?" Pierce rose from his seat, radiating self-assurance. "Yes, Your Honor. Our evidence is based on an oral promise Mrs. Bailey made to my client shortly before her death. Tiana Bailey is prepared to testify under oath as to the contents of that conversation." Judge Howell raised an eyebrow. "Were there any witnesses to this conversation?" "Unfortunately, no, Your Honor," Pierce admitted. "It was a private, confidential conversation between two women, but we do have circumstantial evidence. Mrs. Bailey repeatedly expressed a desire for family heirlooms to be inherited. The ring in question has been in the family for generations, and it makes sense that she would want it to go to the wife of her only son. Ms. Ramirez, what is your position?" The judge turned to our side. Ella stood up, holding a file folder in her hands. "Your Honor, we categorically deny the plaintiff's claim. We have Edna Bailey's written will, which clearly states that all of her personal belongings passed to her husband, Wilford Bailey. Moreover, we have presented the testimony of Ruth Johnson, a nurse, and Betty Parker, a caregiver, who cared for Mrs. Bailey during the last months of her life. Both state that Tiana Bailey paid virtually no visits to the dying woman and was never alone with her long enough for the alleged conversation." The judge nodded and turned several pages in his notes. "I see this testimony. Mr. Pierce, what is your response to that?" "The nurse couldn't have been with Mrs. Bailey every minute," Pierce objected. "Moreover, we find the testimony of these witnesses unreliable, given their close relationship to the defendant. Nurse Johnson has worked at the hospice for 13 years and has no personal relationship with my client," Ella countered. "She testified under oath that the only time Tiana Bailey was left unattended near the dying Edna lasted no more than 15 minutes, and the entire time the plaintiff was on the phone." I watched Tiana's face tense. She hadn't expected us to be so well prepared. "There is one more aspect we would like to present to the court," Ella continued, pulling another document out of the folder. "The ring in dispute was recently appraised by Raymond Brooks, a leading gemologist in the state. According to his report, the pink diamond not only has a tangible value of approximately $7 million, but also significant historical value." The hall erupted in murmurs, and even Judge Howell looked surprised. "7 million?" He glanced at the document Ella handed him. "That's well over the original estimate of 3 million. "Exactly, Your Honor," Ella nodded. "As stated in the expert report, this diamond allegedly belonged to the Austrian aristocratic family of Lichnowsky, Beethoven's patrons, before it entered the collection of Count Esterhazy and then was acquired by my client's grandfather. This makes the plaintiff's claim even less plausible. Would Edna Bailey, knowing of such value, have chosen to transfer a historic family heirloom to her daughter-in-law without any written confirmation, without witnesses, contrary to the clearly expressed will in the will?" I noticed Hayden turn to Tiana with an expression of surprise and confusion. He was clearly unaware of the ring's true value. Tiana, on the other hand, looked frankly shocked, her eyes widening at the mention of 7 million. Judge Howell studied the documents for a few moments, then looked up. "Mr. Bailey," he turned to me, Were you aware of the full historical value of this ring when it was in your possession? I stood up as Ella had taught me, straight, but not tense. Not fully, Your Honor. I knew the diamond was rare and valuable, but the details of its provenance from the Lichnowsky family were news to me. My grandfather had only mentioned that he had purchased it from Count Esterhazy in the 30s. I see, the judge nodded. Mrs. Bailey, he turned to Tiana. When did you say the late Edna Bailey promised you this ring? Tiana stood up, looking uncertain under the judge's steady gaze. It was about a week before she died, Your Honor. I was helping her with her medication while Wilford went to the pharmacy. She said she wanted the ring to stay in the family, that it should go to her son's wife, as was the custom in their family. She asked you not to tell Wilford right away, to give him time to grieve. And you decided to give him time for 3 whole years, the judge observed. And then instead of discussing it with him, you just took the ring without permission? Tiana looked caught off guard by the directness of the question. Yeah, I knew he'd say no. He never accepted me as part of the family. I just wanted to wear the ring to a charity event, impress him. I was going to return it the next day. And how did you gain access to Mr. Bailey's safe? The judge continued. Your Honor, my client didn't break into the safe. Mr. Bailey showed her how to open it when he was bragging about the ring. That's a lie, I couldn't help myself, and Leonard put his hand on my shoulder warningly. Mr. Bailey, please refrain from commenting until you are asked, the judge said sternly, then turned to Tiana again. Mrs. Bailey, are you saying that the defendant voluntarily showed you the code to the safe? Not exactly, Tiana swallowed nervously. He mentioned to me that he was using his wedding date as the code. Yeah, I just memorized the date. So you admit that you deliberately used the information you received from Mr. Bailey to gain access to his safe without permission? The judge clarified. I didn't think I was doing anything wrong, Tiana exclaimed. The ring was supposed to be mine by right. Edna wanted it. Judge Havel looked at her for a long moment, then turned his eyes to the documents in front of him. I have listened to both sides and read all of the evidence presented. Given the existence of a clear written will, the absence of witnesses to the alleged promise, the testimony of the nursing staff contradicting the plaintiff's version of events, and Mrs. Bailey's admission of unauthorized access to the defendant's safe, the court finds the claim of Tiana Bailey for ownership of the pink diamond ring is dismissed. The ring is the legal property of Wilford Bailey under Edna Bailey's will. I felt the tension that had been gripping me all these months begin to release. Ella and Leonard exchanged satisfied glances, while confusion reigned at the plaintiff's table. Moreover, the judge continued, given Mrs. Bailey's admission to unauthorized access to the safe and the taking of valuable property without the owner's permission, I am referring the case file to the prosecutor's office for consideration of possible criminal prosecution for theft. Court is adjourned. The clang of the judge's gavel echoed around the room. Tiana looked stunned, her face pale. Hayden sat motionless, as if he didn't realize what had just happened. I stood up, feeling oddly devastated. Yes, I had won the case, but at what cost? My family was ruined for good. As we were leaving the hall, Tiana suddenly jumped up and pointed her finger at me. You're all the same, she shouted, her voice shaking with rage. The elite, aristocrats. You think you can control everything just because you have money and connections? Mrs. Bailey, said the judge warningly. You've never accepted me, she continued, ignoring the warning, because I'm not good enough for your precious family, because I'm not educated enough, not sophisticated enough for you. Or maybe because you're just a racist? Tiana, Hayden finally snapped out of his stupor and grabbed her arm. Stop it. No, I won't stop it. She ripped her arm out. Your father always looked down on me, always thought I was unworthy, and now he's used his connections, his judicial friends, to take away what is rightfully mine. One more word, Mrs. Bailey, and I will find you guilty of contempt of court, Judge Havel said sternly. Tiana was silent, but her eyes burned with hatred. Hayden put his arm around her shoulders and let her out, but stopped at the door and turned to me. Are you happy? He asked quietly. You won your ring. I hope it keeps you warm at night, because you have no one else. His words hurt more than I expected. Hayden, I began, taking a step toward him. This isn't about the ring, it's about the truth. about the memory of your mother. No, he shook his head. It's always been about control, about having things your way. You've never respected my choices, my decisions, and now you've proven it once again. Choosing to be a liar and a thief? The words came out before I could stop them. Hayden's face contorted with pain and anger. Goodbye, Father. You won't hear from me again. We're leaving Kemmerer, and I hope I never see you again. With those words, he turned and walked out of the hall, taking Tiana away. I stood there stunned. All these months I had fought for justice, for the truth, for Edna's memory. But the price had been too high. I had lost my only son. I'm sorry, Wilford, Ella said quietly, putting her hand on my shoulder. Sometimes even victory can feel like defeat. A month later, I was sitting in my office looking at the papers on the desk in front of me. It was an agreement to donate Edna's ring to the Smithsonian Institution's permanent exhibit. After much deliberation, I decided that a piece of jewelry of such historical value belonged in a museum where it could be seen and appreciated by many, not in a lonely old man's safe. In the morning, I received a short letter from Hayden, the first contact I'd had in a while. He and Tiana had indeed left Kemmerer, just as he had said they would. They had moved to Seattle, where he had taken a job with a large jewelry firm. There was no apology or warmth in the letter, just dry information and a request not to try to contact him again. His decision was final. I signed the contract with the museum and set my pen aside. The office window overlooked the mountains surrounding Kemmerer, the very sleeping giants, as Edna had called them. Now I understood her metaphor more deeply than ever. Like those ancient mountains, some truths remain unchanged despite all the storms and adversity. Perry was right. The ring was just a thing, a material object that could be lost, stolen, passed on. The real memory of Edna lived in me, in our years together, in the love we shared. No Tiana, no trial could take that away from me. In the visiting room of the Smithsonian Institution, where the pink diamond ring was placed a month later, a small plaque appeared. Presented by Wilford Bailey in memory of his wife, Edna Bailey, 1948-2022. A love story of 50 years. People coming to see the rare pink diamond were attracted by its beauty and historical value. But more important to me was that Edna's name was now immortalized, and the ring was safe, out of reach of greedy hands. I returned to the empty house that had once been full of life, laughter, and love. Now it was mine alone without Edna, without Hayden. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a strange calm. I had done what I thought was right. I had protected Edna's memory, prevented Tiana from sullying her last will with false statements. The toxic web into which our family relationship had become had been severed. Yes, I was alone, but that solitude was purer and more honest than a fake relationship built on lies and manipulation. I walked over to the mantelpiece where the picture from our wedding stood, me and Edna, young and happy, with a ring on her finger that was now seen by hundreds of people every day. We did the right thing, I said quietly, looking at her smiling face. It belongs to history now, as it should have. In that moment, I realized that the long journey that had begun with betrayal and theft had finally led to some kind of closure. Not a happy ending. Life rarely gives such, but a just ending, a truth that ultimately triumphed over lies. I was alone but free, free from toxic relationships, from manipulation, from having to constantly defend myself against those who were supposed to be my family. And in that freedom was its own dignity, its own quiet strength. Outside my window, snowfall was beginning to fall. The first of the season, pure white snow covered the Kemmerer as if it were covering the past and promising a new beginning.